Hello, friends. Welcome to Cutting Down the Nets. We're lacking the enthusiasm that we had pre-tournament, which comes with the day 4 pummeling, where we had some hope, but it didn't work out. This show is about getting better. If you are ever going to lose and not evaluate what happened, I think you're at a severe disadvantage and doomed to repeat mistakes. So this is not a bad beats show, but this is an important recap that walks through the process and probably some process errors I know I made personally, and I've avoided many mistakes over the last 20 years of doing this, and I think I found a couple more this year. So this will be worth your time. But if you are not interested in getting better and just want to follow picks, close out. Sweet 16 shows tomorrow, but I think you're making a huge mistake. Let's figure out what happened. Overall, Patty went 14, 15, and 2, and there was one game canceled. The 2 is when Patty's projection matches the point spread verbatim. I don't even consider playing that game. And in the round of 32, 8 and 8, which didn't feel like 8 and 8 after the death blow of day 4. So, what is Patty? Patty is an algorithm I created. The premise of the play is it weights recent play significantly more than full season play. The computations I use is using adjusted offensive and defensive efficiencies, very similar to Ken Palm's efficiency margins that he uses, Bart Torvik's Pythagorean theorem. This is all the same stuff in calculating a point spread. I just weight recent play way more than most people do. So the first question is, did recent play do bad, but full season do good? I have good news. Full season did awful. So if you played it straight, Ken Palm does projections on his site. You say, ooh, Ken Palm's got this game at 4 and the spread is 6. He's using more of a full season number. And that, my friends, went, I believe, there's 31 games. So it would be 14 and 17 on Ken Palm. So this is not a flaw in premise or foundation. Basically what happened is more efficient teams lost or failed to cover against less efficient teams. This happens, but this is not in which data set you were looking at. Here's an example. Wisconsin, Ole Miss, a bunch of years ago. Wisconsin was 8th in Ken Palm. Mississippi came in, I think, 50th. They had won their conference tournament. Inefficient team. Sloppy, can get hot, high variance, Marshall Henderson, the whole works. And Mississippi just woodshedded Wisconsin. That doesn't mean it's not possible. It's frustrating. And we had some examples of that. So overall, that is how we performed. This has happened before. This is not a... I don't know. It's surprising because you hate to lose, but this has clearly happened before. I still like the long-term prospects of this model that has been profitable in season long for over thousands of games and over the tournament for hundreds of games. So we move on. Here is round number 1, the round of 64. What you have here is the higher seeded team, the lower seeded team, Patty's median point spread, and the Vegas point spread I was dealing with at the time. On the far right, we are sorted by projected cover percentage, which would be play the best plays, right? Okay. So overall, the 2 gray ones are games that Patty had matching the point spread identical. So we were left with 29 games. And overall, if you played the model completely straight up, you went 14 and 15. We'll get into kind of the record by percentages and things like that, but I did want to talk through some notes on the game. Hartford covered. It was very, very close, but they played Baylor, and these guys, I tell you. So here's what happened to them, which I just thought was interesting. They went 14 and 19 at the rim, and then 5 of 38 in mid to long range. So basically, if they weren't getting a layup or a dunk, they shot 13% and still covered. So I stand by that number. I'm probably wrong on Baylor, but a team basically shot 13% from outside 4 feet and still covered a number. So I feel pretty good about that. Bonnie got waxed. Honestly, didn't see it. Don't know how. Wouldn't change my bet. Not a bad beat. It's just kind of the way it went. How did it go down? LSU's defense, it's not good. They have like 15 performances on the year that are meh, and then 4 that are really awful, and then 9 that are pretty good. So I had a pretty high standard deviation in there, but probably did not shade that enough towards LSU having a good performance. Would it have moved it close enough to make a difference on whether or not I bet this game? No, I don't believe so. Ohio, Virginia. Ohio controlled the game pretty much start to finish. Jason Preston played well, went well. Oregon State, same story. Georgetown, our second waxing. They ran into Colorado, who does shoot the 3 at a pretty good clip. They have never shot the 3 as well as they did that day. So 8 of Georgetown's last 11 games had a defensive efficiency of less than 90. And during the tournament against Colorado, it was 117. So that was fun and not very predictable. Clemson led at the half and failed to cover against Rutgers. They lost by 4. Virginia Tech led the entire game, gave it away, had a good beat to force overtime, and then played OT without Aluma and Mutz, which was just no chance. Utah State, similar story to Clemson, led at the half, and then slowly gave it away with about 15 minutes to go in the game and could not get fully right. Drexel failed to cover against Illinois. Drexel had 1 offensive efficiency below 93 on the season. They showed up with an 87 against Illinois, shooting 28% on 2-point attempts, and they were 52% on the year, so that's fun. Santa Barbara didn't hold on for the win, but that was a smooth cover. They're never easy covers, but pretty smooth cover. Georgia Tech, I gave 3 points for Moses Wright being out. I did not bet much on the game, but I should not have bet that game at all in any way, shape, or form. Maryland was good process in reacting to line movement and making sure that you were betting the line and not the team. So overall, this is just kind of how it went. So some things to note. I typically bet first halves to kind of mitigate risk. They're very correlated with the end of the game. They usually end up with the same winning percentage, but can help mitigate that risk a little bit. Hartford did not cover the first half. I would never recommend a 16 seed first half. That's just something I don't like to do. In fact, I think all 16 seeds failed to cover the first half. Yeah, Norfolk did not against Gonzaga. Drexel did not. Texas Southern did not. So first halves for giant underdogs, not good. Did Bonnie cover the first half? No. Ohio did. Oregon State did. Georgetown did not. Clemson did. Virginia Tech did. Utah State did. Talked about Drexel. Santa Barbara, depending on the number, otherwise it was a push. Georgia Tech did not. Maryland did. So there is paths here. And when you're talking about going 14 and 15, yeah, it can be frustrating. So let's dig in a little bit here. Estimated cover percentages greater than 60 went 3 and 4, with 4 and 3 first half bets. Greater than 55% went 7 and 7. First halves were 7, 6, and 1. And if you bet anything greater than the implied VIG, 52.38, went 10 and 9 or 10, 8, and 1 on first halves. So ultimately, we had a middling performance that was not doing well at the top, and bet scaling got me pretty hard. So if I'm going to win, I don't know, 45% of $400 and $500 bets, and then win 55% of $100 bets, I'm going to have a bad time. And that is what happened, and that was frustrating. So here was my card in general for like strong plays. Did I bet 14 games? No, I played a bunch of first halves, played some money lines, played some over-unders, but we're talking about main plays here. So, wins: Ohio, Oregon State, Santa Barbara, Maryland, Villanova were all strong plays. Losses: Bonnie, Georgetown, Mizzou, Virginia Tech, Utah State, North Carolina, BYU. I'm sure you still remember these. They still sting as the big losses. The reason Clemson's missing here is we failed to get that game in, which is part of the process errors that I will highlight later. So overall, on big bets for the first two rounds, I went 5-7. Medium bets, 2-0, and then again, I played tons of crap below that. This is kind of like a $300 threshold, roughly. So, all right. So process flaw number one: Eastern Washington. I was running scared at the time, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be up here based on cover percentage, based on the type of game. It's just this fear-based human decision-making that causes problems at times. Now, let's talk about some big mistakes. Missouri. They opened at +2. I had them favored by 1. That's a good play. So I had them favored by 1. Guess what I bet that line at? Large. Mizzou -2. So that's an embarrassing process flaw. You were so focused on the team, you knew the spread had moved, and just in the moment, you're like, no, it's still Mizzou. I mean, these games are never decided by the point spread. Like, that's a process flaw. You need to react to that information. So Mizzou at -2, when my model actually had them at -1, that's embarrassing that you would not only play against it, but play against it to that level. So that is a significant process flaw. North Carolina, similar story. This game opened with North Carolina getting a point. It was a pick'em for like a day or two, and then it slowly slid to North Carolina. It went off at 2 or 2.5, depending on where you were. For us, it was 2. We bet it late. We still bet North Carolina, which is fine. I had them favored by 2.8, but to make that a large bet is a process flaw, and it is a take lock on opening lines, and you need to react to that stuff. BYU, I did not officially pull in UCLA stuff. I reviewed it, I looked at it, and I didn't feel it would make a difference in the outcome. In hindsight, after doing that, because I was frustrated with the outcome, that spread difference was not 3 points. It was like 1.3 after refreshing UCLA. So that's just a mistake. So the ones in red are mistakes here. These were bad process decisions. And I probably could have slid Houston up too, and I'll talk about bet scaling a little bit at the end. So overall, down 680 on big bets. Here's what this card should have looked like. Get Mizzou out. That's not even a play. The difference was 1 point by the way the game went off, and it was foolish to not react. North Carolina, still a play, but let's drop them down into more of a mid-tier. BYU, still a play. Let's drop them down into more of a mid-tier. Let's get Eastern Washington where they belonged. And all of a sudden, that changes things quite a bit. Just with simple decision-making, planning, just not living in the moment, and it's frustrating, okay? Houston, I think, was fine as a middle-tier bet. We'll talk about bet scaling later. Hartford and Iona should have been brought in to this tier. I actually played Alabama against my model because I'm an idiot. Also should have had Drexel in here. And overall, that's where that should have been, which would have actually been profitable. I don't think there's anything you can do about Bonnie and Georgetown. Clemson led at the half, didn't cover. Virginia Tech led at the half, didn't cover. And Utah State led at the half, didn't cover. Now, led at the half, didn't cover means a lot less when the team was favored by 5. But these are all underdogs leading at the half and failing to cover is just frustrating. So overall, not happy. Bonnie and Georgetown, you're losing those games no matter what. You swing one of these, 2 of these, you're talking 7-4, 8-3 for big bets, and it's just a different story. And I think it was some human error that led to bets being in the wrong tiers or being made at all, which I own. That's my mistake, and I paid for it financially. And then there is a way that those games just don't go the way they did. Our other ones were in hand, top to bottom, kind of in order, with Nova and Eastern Washington in good shape, but paths to losing as well. So to go 5-7 with the information I had in front of me was egregious, in my opinion. Let's get to the round of 32. Process error number 1. I talked about it with UCLA. I should have brought their profile in after the play-in game. Should have just reworked it. But it's hard to do. There are games going on from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. And it's a long day, and it's hard to recover from the previous day. It's hard to sit down and handicap. So you're looking at things and you're doing some manual shading, and I'm just out on manual shading. I'm going to rerun stuff every single time, every single game. So here's what the round of 32 looked like. Team, spread for Patty and Vegas, and cover percentages. So we're sorted by cover percentage here. So talk about bringing in data. We had USC's profile did not include Drake, and Drake's profile did not include Wichita State. And then when you're talking round of 32, we now had 2 days worth of games where we have this cross-pollination going on between conferences, and it's super important to react to that. And you saw it. The Pac-12 was doing very well. Big Ten was not. And that's kind of a red flag as to just ignoring those type of days. And the sample size isn't that strong, but man, just put in the work, just put in the work. Okay, same story as round 1. We have whiffs at the top, did well on the fringe plays, and then some stayaways, and what do you end up with? Okay, so Oregon State. I had this at like 3 when I bet it, and then after running the data again, and by the way, the data does not include the game played. Like, it's not like I'm pulling in Oregon State versus Okie State and running it again. No, I'm pulling in data up to that moment in time. But with everything that had transpired, including Oregon State's performance against Tennessee, Okie State's against Liberty, I now had Oregon State favored and not Okie State -3. So this is all updated information that I could have done, didn't do, and instead relied on manual shading, which is egregious again. So Oregon State covered and won. Wisconsin did not against Baylor. I ended up not betting that game. Maryland, Alabama. I don't know what to do with Alabama. They don't even have that high variance of an offense. They just have an immense ceiling. And it shows up against Mississippi State, shows up against LSU midseason, showed up against Maryland, and it didn't show up against Iona. So what do you do? But overall, I think there are things to consider this offseason about teams' ceilings and teams' floors, and trying to factor that in somehow. Like, I bet Bama and Maryland, There's two teams that obviously have a similar profile if I have Bama by 0.4. The ceilings on those teams are nowhere close. And the floors on those teams are nowhere close. Maryland's a good median projection team. If Maryland had a floor game, woof. If Bama had a floor game, they're probably still okay. And then if both teams had ceiling games, there's no way Maryland's ceiling is even close to Alabama's. So, Houston Rutgers, didn't see it. Lower possession game. It's frustrating. Still don't know on that one. I was 0 for 2 on Rutgers bets, which is kind of silly had we made the first one. Oral Roberts, Florida. This was an interesting case. So I scrub data and I remove outliers. And if I left outliers in, Florida was by like 12 in this game. Okay. If I took them out, it was Oral Roberts. So why would, for that game, I get scared away by outlier removal? I think it's because it impacted the amount so much. Usually, outliers help solidify a decision by removing them and just making it more clear. This was very conflicting, and to have the point spread right in the middle did not help. So I made a Florida bet. I did not win it, and in hindsight, it should have been Oral Roberts. Ohio Creighton. Jason Preston scores 4 points. You're going to have a bad day. There's nothing you can do about it. Oregon, Iowa. Both teams have pretty good ceilings. I don't know why Oregon's data was so bad defensively. Clearly a good team. I think it's a ceiling thing and factoring in ceiling. Their offense was really gelling the last 7 games. Not surprised by their offensive output. Iowa's defense was really gelling, and I'm not surprised that they got torched. And they typically get torched in high possession games, which this was. And it's just too much manual massaging for one matchup that I'm comfortable with. But it certainly could have made me sit out a bet had I chose to do that. Syracuse ended up having them favored over West Virginia by the time that was all said and done. Gonzaga, good play. Colorado did not get it done. The industry is pretty split there. I saw a lot of sharp people on both sides. Nova and UCLA were winners. Arkansas, here's another story. Texas Tech goes off at -2. It opened as a pick'em. Manual massaging had Texas Tech by like 1. Yet again, same story as Missouri. Model says Texas Tech by 1. Line is Texas Tech -2. So I bet it, and that's a mistake. And after uploading the proper data, it was actually tighter than 1. It was 0.3. So you're getting a little bit of value on Arkansas. LSU, Michigan, I'll own that. I just wasn't going to not do that without livers in the game for Michigan. Loyola, mentally weak, scared of Illinois. It's a hindsight bet. And then USC, Kansas. With manual shading, I had Kansas by, I think, by 2.5. Okay? And the point spread was USC -1. Had I pulled in the data that accounted for their lack of defense against Eastern Washington, USC's performance against Drake, and it's not just these games that are played. So if all the Pac-12 is doing good, any game USC had against Pac-12 opponents, it's bringing up their profile for the whole year. And the inverse goes for the Big 12. So just, again, a huge mistake on my part, and one that I have to live and eat with. So overall, 8-8. Let's look at cover percentages, and we'll go back to what we played since we just finished with the games. Greater than 60%, 3-5, 2-6 first half. Greater than 55%, 5-6, 4-7 first half. Bet anything bigger than the VIG, 8-7, 8-7 first half, and overall 8-8. So what do we do with this information? Basically, here's how this card went and mistakes made. I mentioned how Oral Roberts, Florida, just should not have taken place. That was a mistake to just all of a sudden use a new data set for, I don't know, a hunch or something. That's just weak. Kansas should not have been on a card in any way, shape, or form. The difference was too little. The projected cover percent was too little. That was a take lock. I'm interested in Kansas. Now we've got the matchup. Let's go. So 4-7 on big bets. Most of those losses coming in the final 5-6 games, which was awesome. UCLA for a small bet. Texas Tech, I already mentioned. I would have changed that. And then Colorado. So overall, significant hemorrhaging of cash in the second round. Here's what this card should have looked like. Florida out. ORU in. I should have, and Houston's listed on here twice, so this is really 5 and 6. Disregard that. That's fine. And so that's going to bring that number up to like 0. And then UCLA, Arkansas, Loyola in the mid-tier. That's what I should have been comfortable with. Big bets on those 5, mid-tier bets here, sit out Kansas. You know, what do you do? It's frustrating. So let's go to my process errors. I've talked about ceiling versus floor. How do we account for a team's true ceiling and true floor? Do I just add that as a data point and pull in their top 5, bottom 5, and see how high that ceiling is? It might just be more data and it can be a little confusing. Bet scaling. So we talked about how if something has a 3% greater chance of happening, why are we betting like 4 times the amount on that extra 3%? And that is something that I want to get better at. That is, here's where it comes from. If you have a $5,000 bankroll and you feel you have an 8% edge, it should be a $400 bet. And if you feel you have a 5% edge, it should be like a $250 bet. It just doesn't feel consistent, and it really hurt this trip. It really helped 2 years ago. So I just need to figure out bet scaling and mitigating that risk a little bit more. And that might be splitting it between first half and game, something like that. That is something I want to get better at. Bet timing and bankroll. Here's the bet timing problem, and then here's the bankroll problem. Bet timing. There are many times that I am getting the worst possible line on things that I've known for 5 days I want to do, and then as you saw, in some cases, still making that decision. We talked about Missouri, Oklahoma. Now here is the flip side of that. It didn't make a difference in the result. If I had locked in Missouri +2 and they go off at -2, that doesn't change the outcome. They lost by 5 points or whatever it was. Okay? That doesn't change the result. But that's one sample. If you got 4 points of closing line value every time, that is a good bet. So getting Missouri at +2, which is what I wanted when it was available online, but I was not able to bet yet on that game. Should have done it. Here's the problem. You bring a bunch of cash, and if each pod of 4 games is going to be like $2,000 worth of bets, you then need $2,000 for the next pod because first pod isn't really finished yet. And if you want to be cashing tickets all day just to tread water to make more bets, you end up in this situation of like, I've got tickets, I've got some money, how do I figure this out? So I think I'm just going to bring more money, clearly not planning to gamble at all, and just get bets in that I feel could move and identify those that I'm waiting on. I highlighted that in some of the pre-shows and then didn't follow the advice and made some huge mistakes. Okay, not reacting to line moves. That's a process error. So I did it properly with UConn and Maryland. That game opened at 1.5. I was on the UConn side. More information came in. The line ended up at 4 when I was in Las Vegas. So I bet Maryland +4. Again, I had the game at 1.5. So we had the game at like 2. Good reaction. These other reactions are pitiful. Letting North Carolina lose 2 points of value and then still betting them for a large amount. Missouri example, those are mistakes, and you don't even have to bet the game. Just don't hammer it after losing all value. Awful decision making, egregious. Okay, not taking advantage of new information. So some of this is truly handicapping each game for all previous games. None of this manual shading stuff and like, it's usually close. It usually is. But I think you're selling yourself short by not truly factoring in everything. And then taking a stand on major injuries was, luckily it didn't cost me much money, but why bet the Georgia Tech game without Moses Wright? The market had reacted 3 points for it. He's probably worth 3 points. So that was my reasoning there. And I just don't think you need to do that. And I think the market overreacted to Davion Harmon being out for Oklahoma. I probably overreacted to Livers being out for Michigan. But based on how those games go, I don't know. I mean, they should have lost LSU, whatever. So I just think there's some process there. So this is not a bad beats show. These are things that I need to think a lot more about in becoming a profitable gambler. If you play this model straight up for both of the rounds of the tournament, so we said 8 and 7 was just a straight, just play it straight up, 8 and 7 in round 2, and round 1. Let's check. What was that? Round 1 was 10 and 9. So 18 divided by 34, 53%. So I had a 53% edge or model, and I lost over $2,000. It's just insane. Like, not to go in and I don't know, win like 44% and lose money. Yeah, that's going to happen. But to actually turn an edge into financial losses requires a significant amount of mistakes. And I made them. I want to avoid them in the future. And I plan on avoiding them in the Sweet 16. That is for sure. So thanks for stopping by, Cutting Down the Nets. Again, I'm going to put out a Sweet 16 show. I hope you found this helpful. It was helpful for me to talk through some of the things that happened. And, if things break a different way, it's probably a complete disaster. And if things break a different way, it is just smooth sailing, a lot of fun. And I think the tournament ending the way it did with the final 4 to 5 games was just awful. I think with 5 games left, I was down $200. So if you basically split those, you may get out of Las Vegas plus. And if you go 0 for 5, you're going to have a bad time. So thanks for stopping by, Cutting Down the Nets.